Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Now today I've got a bunch of things to show you, new things to show you from the Perseverance rover and from Curiosity rover. I've got a bunch of new Gigapans here for you to check out and search from the Perseverance in Jezero crater. And I've got this one here with some images from Rami Bar Ilan, where he's found this thing here, which is really interesting. I love this thing, this is really cool. I'll come back to that a bit later. And I've also got a really cool image up here, which I'm going to start with. Now, this image is from the copter drone, the helicopter drone, that was only launched for the first time recently, a few days ago. And a lot of you would have seen the footage in my previous video. I showed a bit of footage from this, of it taking off. And there's all sorts of clips you can find on YouTube from NASA and channels like mine, showing various clips of it hovering about 15 feet above the ground. I think it went a little bit higher this time. I'm not sure exactly how high it was when it took this. Now, as I predicted in previous videos going back months ago, what we can see here are structures in the ground buried in sand. Now, this may just look like a load of random rocks to you, but actually, to the trained eye, that's not what we're looking at. Now, the first thing you've got to look at, really, is the tracks. Now, look at the tracks here. They come round here, down here, and back this way, okay? And then back up there. Now, this is a search pattern, okay? Now, this is what you do when you're using ground-penetrating radar. What you do is you have a search grid. So you would drive laterally, then vertically, well, laterally like this, then vertically, then laterally back the other way. And you do a sort of zigzag pattern on the ground to scan what's under the surface. Now, I've got a page up here about ground penetrating radar, and it's from Wikipedia, so it's not that reliable, but it's pretty standard stuff, this. Now, it doesn't say anything about the rover and how it works, but what it does tell you is how ground penetrating radar works using UHF and VHF frequencies. Now, specifically what this does is it can actually detect the differences in density between the hard objects under the ground and the softer objects under the ground, like sand and mud. And it can also detect voids and things like caverns and tunnels and stuff like that, okay? And even metallic objects and things like that, because obviously these things have different densities and reflect differently the radiation that's being pushed down onto these things and reflected back. It works a little bit like sonar, but obviously in solid material rather than water. It's a similar kind of technology to that. I'm not going to go into all that now, it's quite complicated. I'll put links in the description below so you can check this out and all the other things I'm showing here. But basically, let me show you this image. You can see where the tracks are going. And if we were to fly up a bit higher with this copter drone, we'd see a lot more of these tracks, obviously. And we'd be able to see the search pattern they're using. Now, why are they driving in this search pattern in this area unless they're scanning the ground? They must be scanning the ground using the GPR, okay? And what I'm picking up here, now, it's not immediately obvious, but what I'm seeing here, we got a wall here, right? We got a wall here. Now, this stuff is all collapsed and may have shifted slightly. There's probably been tsunamis and all sorts of stuff going on in this area. So the buildings here are not in very good shape. They're not only ruined and dilapidated, but they've probably shifted slightly through subsidence in the ground and movement in the soil, okay? And obviously when these buildings collapsed, they wouldn't have collapsed in a perfect rectangle or a perfect square or a perfect circle. They'd be slightly misshapen, okay? But we got another wall coming this way, here. More debris falling in here, right? And if you look carefully, we've got a dune here at the back. It comes along here. That, I think, marks a sort of boundary of this structure. Now, this structure, let's get rid of those lines. This structure here, I think, is probably related to one here. We got another rectangle here. Right, it's here, and we have a circle here. You can see the stones in the ground, a stone circle. Now, this to me looks like a building complex or part of a town or village or city, and is exactly what I predicted in some videos that I've done over the last few months, going right back to last year, in fact. Okay, I said that there are structures here because I can see them in the satellite images, and I showed them as well in previous videos. So if you haven't seen those, go back and check out some of my Jezero crater videos and also my previous perseverance videos, because I've been saying this for months now, going right back to the middle of last year, in fact, because I've been studying this crater for quite some time, getting on for 6 or 7 or 8 months now, and I've done quite a few videos on this, and I have shown some of these things from space. It can be seen in the satellite images. You can see the rectangles in the ground and circles where these formations of ruins are. Okay, you can see them from space in quite good detail, but now we're seeing them from near the ground from the Ingenuity helicopter. Okay, and you can see these shapes. So the reason this dune is formed here is because there's something below it. That means that there's probably a wall sticking up a bit there, or a boundary. Okay, now as I've said before, I think the Martians, they were living in sort of quite small buildings, not huge buildings, a lot of them, although there are larger buildings that I've shown before, larger structures, but generally quite small houses and complexes of houses, groups of buildings together like you would have in a town or village, but maybe on a bit of a smaller scale. Okay, and in Jezero crater specifically, there are areas that look very different. You have smooth, flat areas of the lake bed, which look just like a salt lake, and then you have higher up areas which are covered in sand, and that's what this is. This is like an island. Okay, I think they were living on islands specifically to protect themselves, not only from predators, but from each other. Okay, and I've shown evidence for this before, not only with remains of dangerous animals like large lizards or possible dinosaurs and other scary creatures, but also there was a lot of warfare on the ground, and I found lots of military debris and dead warriors and things like helmets and weaponry lying around on the ground, and there was obviously a lot of warfare going on the surface, and it would make sense if you lived in a lake bed or the edge of a lake or just in a lake, you would have like a little island. Maybe that would be an artificial island or a natural one. It'd be much easier to defend yourself against either predators or enemies. Okay, so that's what we have here. Now, it's not immediately obvious. Now, what I'm going to do now, you can actually see there's another rectangle here, right? And we've got long lines of, like I said, we've got long lines here of rocks in the ground, which were probably walls. Okay, now I'm really going to darken this up now to show you how these stand out when you add contrast to the image. Okay, now try and ignore the tracks on the ground and just look at the lines of rocks like I showed you. Okay, that's what we're looking at. Try and ignore the tracks if you can. It's not easy, but you can see in between them. I'll go darker again. Now you can see these shapes. Then now you can really see this one here, especially. This is a building, and this one over here, and they've actually driven around these structures to scan the structures. They've driven the rover right through the middle of it all, so they can see the difference in the different parts of the structure. In other words, you would get a kind of topographical underground map of the structures and different density of rocks and formations of rocks below the surface. We're only seeing the surface here. These probably go down quite a long way, I would say. They may even be 2 or 3 stories deep, some of these things. They could even be way deeper. As many researchers have said over many years, I think they were actually building quite deep into the ground, because the radiation levels in these areas on Mars are pretty high, and you would have to have extensive underground dwellings, at least for a lot of the year, for people to shelter from not only the severe cold, but also the radiation. Okay, but you can see these shapes. Now you can see one here now. That's coming out now. You can see that. So what we have here is a building complex. Okay, can see the walls here, here, and here, okay? Quite thick walls. Now, I've shown some of these structures up on Mount Sharp in Gale Crater before, and they do have quite thick walls. Now, of course, these have collapsed, so they're not probably this wide. As they collapse down, they look wider because they kind of spread out a bit, okay? And obviously there would have been subsidence and movement in the ground since that happened as well. So these will be distorted. But you can see this is a complex, and that ridge there marks the edge or a boundary here, or a road even. There may be a pathway or road here, and more structures over here. So I'm hoping when we get more of these images, I'll be able to show you that there are multiple complexes in the ground and multiple structures, as I predicted many months ago, okay? So that was really interesting. And incidentally, I'll flip it to negative for you, and we'll see what happens then. Let me get rid of that. So all you've got to do is play with the contrast with these images. I've enlarged this and brightened it up first, and then what I've done now, what I've shown you is me just darkening it and adding contrast, okay? That's all you've really got to do. Contrast is your best friend when you're doing this kind of research on Mars. You don't have to use a burn tool. The burn tool is way too destructive for these things. You don't need to do that. Just use contrast and a bit of common sense. And you may need to fiddle with the contrast settings and the brightness settings, but you should be able to do it fairly simply. Basically, and also using negative, as I said before in my last video, if you flip things to negative after you've enhanced the contrast, like I'm just about to do now. So now you can really see these shapes, okay? Now, to the untrained eye, they would say, oh, that's pareidolia, you're just like looking for faces in the clouds or bunnies in the clouds. BS. I've been doing this for a very long time. I was trained in archaeological illustration and photography at college many years ago, back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I've worked for some quite well-known people, scientists, making maps of Africa and doing illustrations, and working for ZooCheck and various organisations that were part of the United Nations and stuff like that back in the day when I was still a student and a young researcher. So I've been doing this for an awful long time, and I've been studying satellite images of Mars specifically since the mid-70s, since about 76, 77. So I've been doing this a hell of a long time. So people who just come along and say, oh, is this pareidolia? Well, if it's pareidolia, why don't you go up to some people that do this in places like Egypt and see how you get treated when you go up to them and say this is just pareidolia? Okay? See how they like it. Because you'd probably get a punch in the face. Because if it wasn't for pareidolia, if we didn't recognise patterns, the museums would be freaking empty. There'd be no statues, there'd be no artifacts to look at, and there'd be nothing. And we would be living in some kind of quasi-reptilian communist state where only people in power disseminate and distribute knowledge, okay? Civilians are the ones who are doing disclosure around the world. Don't expect NASA to come out and say there are buildings here, okay? They're not going to do it. They are gagged by the criminally insane agency, okay? And one or two other letter agencies. You're not going to get disclosure from these people. They're doing stuff in secret. They are run by the military, and the way they keep military power is to keep secrets away from other military organisations around the world. That's how they maintain their power, not only over them, but over their own population and their own government. And you have to question really who is the government of the United States. Is it the criminally insane agency, or is it the government? I think the former. I can recommend a channel on YouTube called Dark Journalist, okay? And he goes into a lot of this detail about how these organisations work and how they keep secrets from each other and how they run things and bump people off they don't like and such like, including presidents, okay? And they also came up with the term conspiracy theorist and pareidolia. And they'll use these words to try and discredit anyone they don't agree with. So if you're using words like that, then you are literally spouting talking points from the CIA that are given to the media and to politicians to try and discredit anyone who questions their dogma, okay? So bear that in mind. So that's what we have here. It's not just patternicity, it's not pareidolia. These are structures in the ground. You can quite clearly see them once you know what to look for, okay? And we will see better ones than this coming up later. I'm absolutely sure of it now. I was pretty sure before, but I'm even surer now because this is what we have. We have formations of ruined structures in the ground, okay? I noticed a discrepancy between the left and the right mast cam on the rover. And you can see here that this one here, Sol 59 MR, which is mast right, is different to this one here, Sol 59 ML, which is mast left. The mast left is a very different colour to the mast right. Now those have both been enhanced with exactly the same amount of contrast and exactly the same amount of colour correction. So they should come out the same, but they don't. That's because I think that the mast left and the mast right have got either been calibrated differently, i.e. The colour settings or saturation is different, or they have slightly different orange filters on them. And you can actually see here, these are both raw here. This is mast left and this is mast right from Sol 59 there. And you can see this one on the right here is a different colour to this one. It's slightly browner, this one is slightly yellower. And I've noticed this with a lot of these images, they don't match up. Now, I don't know whether it's because the cameras aren't calibrated the same or whether they're using a slightly different orange filter, but I did notice, and I did show this before, that one of the orange filters they're using is much lighter than the orange filters we've seen before that were used or have been used on the Curiosity rover. So I think they're using a different filter perhaps on each one. Now, I don't know why they would want to do that. So let's have a look at this quickly anyway. There's this one that looks like a skull here. A crystallized and fossilized skull here. There's the nose, there's the downturned mouth, there's the chin, eye here, and an eye there. And the head comes round, elongated like many of the other ones I've shown. It might not be, it might be a rock, but those details are a bit too specific. I haven't done any enhancements of this yet, so what I'll do, I'll take a clip of that and see what I can drag out. There's some pretty cool stuff at the back here, these weird sort of groups of rocks which are on little mounds, which I think are possibly structures. There's this one which I really like. Lots of people have pointed this out before. We've got this weird kind of square rock here joined to this one with some kind of weird face looking thing on it or some weird formation there. It's really weird stuff here. This is MSL, which is Mars Science Laboratory, which is Curiosity rover, okay? Sol 3095. Now, I was doing this Gigapan, and just like yesterday, and then I spotted this thing down here, and I thought, wow, what's this? What is that? Now, it doesn't look very detailed here, okay? It's a bit blurry, but we have a very strange object sticking up here with what looks like a loop hanging down from it. What could that be, do you think? I just happened to be looking on Facebook around about the same time. I'm always flicking between these things, and I saw this. I thought, wow, someone else has spotted it. And it was spotted and published first by Rami Bar Ilan. Now, Rami is a very good researcher and also an artist like myself and into graphics and all that kind of thing. And is very good at doing these memes. And I love the way he does these with the little kind of logo at the top. And I'm not sure what's going on with the date here. It says 2020. This image was only published a couple of days ago. So I think that date on here actually is when he made the template, which he puts the images on. Okay, so I think that's what that means. And here it is. There's the actual raw clip. There, it's one arrow. He's got an enlargement and then enhanced it there. And then there's a larger one here. It's kind of what I do. It's similar to what I do with my memes, but I really like Rami's because it's very professionally done. And he knows how to frame the images properly and enhance them without destroying any detail, okay? And you can clearly see on this thing, if I use the magnifier, you've got this loop coming down here, and it goes back up here. And the head of this thing, the loop, it looks like it goes through it, right? And then we've got here, if I zoom in that way, actually, the magnifier can make it a bit more blurred. There we are. If you look here, we've got a sort of body type shape, and also some kind of details here, which look like interlocking parts here, right? Very strange. It looks mechanical to me. I'm not sure what it is. Now, I've called this boat mooring question mark. Now, I put a question mark there for a good reason, because it may well not be. I don't really know, okay? I'm just trying to work it out using basic logic and common sense, which is what I normally do. Now, here's my enhancement over here. Now, it's a little bit smoother, because what I did is I got rid of the distortion in the image first, a lot more, before I enhanced it, okay? Because there is distortion in these images. Now, basically what you've got is a loop hanging down here, and it looks like it goes through the thing at the top. Now, what would that be for? Now, you see similar things to this on dock slides, okay? Where you would have a loop where you would put your rope or chain through to chain or rope your boat to it. You would moor to it. Now, this was a lake bed, okay? And as I've said many, many times before, going back many years, I think there were boats here, and I've shown wrecked boats and ruined boats, half buried in the sand, in this area, not far from here. Ships, boats, and wrecks all over the place, right? Some of them turned upside down, some are on their sides, some are smashed from the top, and they were wrecked in this sort of tsunami or something, and mudslides and stuff. And also, a lot of the numbers that people are finding, you find that on rocks you see numbers written, like 3 or 4 numbers in a row, usually 3, sometimes 2, but usually 3 or 4 numbers of letters, are probably mooring numbers, okay? Now that means that there was a marina here. Now, I have done gigapans on marinas, the old ancient marina in Gull Crater. I'll put a link to that in the description. And you can see wrecked boats on the ground. I mean, they're there, okay? Boats and ships upturned and all sorts, okay? And some of them are a long way off, but some of them are a bit closer, and you can actually see them. And you can even see the structure of how they were built partly as well, where they've eroded away, okay? So, there were boats in the area, and this would explain a lot of these numbers people are finding on rocks and on structures, okay? Ruined structures, there are numbers on a lot of them. And they're showing up quite a lot, and I've shown quite a few, and other channels have shown quite a few as well, and I think that's what they are. So this is the sort of thing you would tie your boat to and moor it to, but it's a little bit more elaborate, and it's kind of ornamental, almost like a gargoyle, because we have here what looks like an arm, and we have these parts here, 1, 2, 3, 4, these kind of cube shapes. Now, I think what that is it might be a sort of a hinge or a chain. This may be the remains of a chain that's around it here, okay? So this is a loop with a possible chain coming down here. I could be wrong, but there's not quite enough detail to say exactly what it is, but there's something here, and these look a bit like chain links, and they look like they're joined to this loop, which goes through this head here, okay? So this is either a mooring or something similar. And like I said, it's ornamental. In other words, it's probably in the shape of a gargoyle or some kind of person, perhaps. But this one happens to have a loop through it and a possible chain hanging down. That's what I think it is. I could be wrong. Okay, so brilliant find by Rami there. And there's a link here to his original post. You click on that, and you can also join his group here. His group here is called Exclusive Mars Images, and this is one he runs, and he's done this really nice illustration here, painting by Rami Bar Ilan, 2021, of one of the statues that was found years ago on in Gale Crater on Mars and the Curiosity rover here. Really, really nice. Very impressive. Really nice stuff. And this is his representation of what we found, or what he found, in one of these images. And I would say that's pretty accurate, because I've studied that image as well, and it's very similar. And he's illustrated it nicely there, which is excellent, really good. It's got these weird sort of bead or chain hanging down from it, which you can see in the original image. So that was really cool. Unfortunately, the original image of that area is so bad that you can barely see anything. It's absolutely one of the worst blurry, muddy images. I think they deliberately muddied them up massively to make them very hard to work with. But he's interpreted it that way, and I think that's very accurate. So there we are. So check this page out, exclusive Mars images. This is Rami's page. There's another thing that he spotted as well down here, which is this. And he's called it Cyclops for a very good reason, because it looks like a one-eyed skull. Now, this is fairly similar to some that I've found before, and is not inconsistent with a lot of the finds that I've found and that he's found over the years. There's an eye there. Well, there's got a nose here, and a mouth with teeth here. Right? Just there. And that's the chin, head coming up here. And there's either a hairline or a helmet coming round. Okay? See that line? Now, I've got it up here, and I've done a clip as well. Okay? And I did this from the Gigapan. I've been a bit more careful with this than the usual, because it pixelates. If you sharpen it too much, right, it all starts to break up. Now, this is very similar, like this eye here, if it is an eye, to some that I've shown before. There was a warrior sort of skull that I found with a helmet on a while back. I'll put a clip of that in now. And check that out. It's very similar around here. It's got this weird sort of eye formation, right? Like there's some sort of weird thing going on there, like an eyepiece or something covering the eye. Very strange. But these do look like teeth here. They're brighter. And shriveled lips here. And a nose here. Okay. Now, I don't think it is a Cyclops. I just think we're seeing it from a funny angle. But this may be the other eye here. Right, and that may be an eye there and an eye there, and we're seeing it kind of leaning back more, and this is the nose here, nostrils, and obviously the chin and mouth and teeth here. These images from the Ingenuity helicopter may prove to be really, really useful as we go along, because I'm pretty sure we're going to see more formations like this in the ground, and hopefully it will go higher. But if we can see them this well from only 15 or 25 feet up, imagine how much better we'll see them when we go 50 feet up. This is going to get really interesting, so keep your eyes peeled. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you soon.